So the audience probably recognizes these three panelists. First, we have Laura Briefer. She is the director of the Salt Lake Department of Public Utilities. Thank you so much, Laura, for taking time and being here today. Next, we have Trevor J. Nielson, the general manager of the Bear River Canal Company. Thank you, Trevor, for making the drive down here. We appreciate it. And finally, we have Teresa Wilhelmsen, and you probably all know her. She's the Utah State Engineer, the Division Director of the Division of Water. So let's begin by giving them a round of applause. We'll be starting with Teresa, up here, and then we'll all come and help you guys transition after that. But Teresa, thank you so much.
So thank you, Elisabeth. Appreciate the introduction and being willing to handle this panel. So I just want to get started with, let this animation play. So as Elisabeth mentioned, I serve as the state engineer and director of the Division of Water Rights. And essentially it's my responsibility to tell the waters of the state where to go, how to get there, how much should get there, and it's according to the prior appropriation system of water rights that we have here in the state of Utah. And what that animation just showed you is how complex this basin is and how water moves through the system. And all of those movements are directed by water rights, existing water rights, and our staff to make that happen. So part of the responsibilities that the state engineer has are defined in Utah Code. So you look at Utah Code 7321, and the responsibilities I have are the measurement, apportionment, and distribution of those waters. If you look at 7321, also responsible for maintaining the public record of those water rights and those measurements and making those clear and transparent. We also have another part of code, which is 73-215, which allows us to do studies, cooperative studies with other agencies for investigations of surface and groundwater. And we do that. And we're looking to do more of that with some funding that we received this year. So as we talk about complexities of water rights, for those of us that have worked in water rights for almost 3 decades, a water right, when I pick it up, it makes sense to me. When I see those files, I understand the systems, I know how they operate, and I know how water can get moved. Someone who may not be as familiar with that system may not see that clarity. But I believe it's our job at the Division of Water Rights over the next few years is to help bring that clarity so that everyone can see how the water rights work and where they move and how they move. But let me just point out some of the complexities of moving water from point A to B that some people may not think about. Measuring and reporting water in a stream system is typically easy, believe it or not. Researching and understanding water rights may be easy for some. However, the full definition of water rights as compared to the available water makes it much more complex. Considerations that we have to look at include return flow, timing, quantity, place, and use. All of those come into play as we move water around the state. Some physical constraints that come into play. If you cease pumping a groundwater well at point A, but you don't know point B, how do you know where that groundwater is moving? That's a complexity that we handle. Some of these old decrees that defined water rights in certain reaches The decrees were formulated to where in the upper valleys, you would put the water out on as much water as you could out on the land, because they knew there was a return flow that would come back to the system, through the system, to the river, and supply the downstream users that water. So underground storage. Another, how that seepage and recharge to the lower river. Another, and I wouldn't call it a complexity, but it's another element that we really needed to understand: ownership and other agreements. So water doesn't just fall out of reservoirs. There's usually an association that oversees and maintains and manages or built that reservoir. There may be agreements that need to be entered into to get water through a facility. We have tribal rights. Those rights are based on a real body of law, and we need to recognize and include those. Mitigation, that's something that can be considered. If you release water at point A to be sent to point B, but maybe it can't get from A to B, but you can exchange it from C and get it to D. There's many ways that you can move water based on the water rights system that we have, if you understand it and understand the physical systems that we have. Emily mentioned water markets. These transfers really do need to operate on a water market system, an open market that can help those transactions happen. It's kind of interesting. There's a book that I read, I don't know, it's probably been 5 years ago, but it was called Engineering Eden. And it dealt with populations, wildlife populations. I don't do wildlife, but it was a fascinating book, and it had engineering in the title, so I read it. No. But this book talked about how the Park Service and some biologists manage wildlife populations as they brought back wolves, or as they removed wolves or bear, how those populations adjusted and adapted. And I think with our water rights system that we have, every movement that we make in that system, we have to understand, because it's going to affect something else. And we really need to make sure, it's my job to protect existing rights, and we need to understand what we are doing to have that happen. So maybe we can work on an engineering Eden of water. I don't know. But it does remind me, some of these systems that we actually have engineered the natural systems, or those return flows. In the Heber Valley, we now store water in Jordanelle, and we mimic those return flows that those historic decrees envisioned by releases from that reservoir, so that we can keep that system as was decreed. So a lot of complexities come into play when we look at distributing water. So we hear the term shepherding a lot. I think it's a little bit of a trinket term. When I look up the definition of shepherding, it's tending sheep. But it also talks about careful management, and distribution is shepherding. And I think it's possibly distribution of those water molecules and careful management of those water molecules. And we do that, we know how to do it, and we'll continue to do it. We do it from my role as state engineer. I have regional engineers throughout the state that are experts in the systems and the water rights in that area. We have distribution engineers who are experts in distributing water on these systems. And we have water commissioners that turn the head gates and understand and interact with folks on those systems to get the water where it needs to go. So these next couple slides, I'm just going to show a very simple example of shepherding. This is a real system, and it's been occurring for a long, long time. So you can kind of see at the top of that, just at the mouth of the canyon, if we were to add 25 or 120 second feet of water at that location, And the purpose of doing that was to get water to that potentially dry river section at the bottom. How would we do that? We have 4 valid water rights with certain amounts along that river section. How we do that is we account for what those water rights would total. In this particular section, we need 42.9 second feet of water to satisfy those 4 water rights along the river. But now that we add that water at the top, say it's 100 second feet, we know that we would have whatever was measured before to satisfy those water rights, so they would receive full delivery, plus 100. And then at the bottom, as it bypasses those water rights, those existing rights, there'd be 100 at the bottom, or close to. Whenever there's a water transfer, any water right owner would know there may be some losses to evaporation, but that's inherent in the system. So let's look at how, if there's not sufficient for those water rights to be met. So let's say there's 20 second feet in the river. Well, each of those points of diversion along that river would take a 47% cut, and that's all that they would be allowed to divert, and that 100 second feet would still bypass and make it to point B and get down that system. Now, this is a very simple example, but it really is a simple practice, and we've done it and we do it. So how do we bring transparency? Our goal, we're calling it stream to screen. We have 125 years of record of diversions. You know, we started in these paper books. We've expanded to our database, and we're expanding that even more to bring more visual tools that will define these water rights. So right now we're working on expanding what we call the Water Right Network. For some of you that know our database, we are calling it WUG 3, which is Water Use Groups 3. But we are actually identifying and bringing together the water right information, the flow data, diversion, the mapping, place of use mapping, and our accounting models into one place for the public to see. So on our website, this is our mapping tool and this tool is actually available now. It's not completely built out, but anyone in the public can see this. So essentially what this tool does, there's an aerial imagery of the Tavione area. We've brought in so that you can visually see all of the canals and the river systems that are within that section. And kind of in the center there, you'll see a little blue watermark. That is actually a point of diversion. And if you can pull up the place of use mapping, these are all the water rights and how they're to be used and where they are used. If you click on those points of diversion, you get a listing from that canal of all of the water rights, and a key here in the priority dates are listed there. So you know which water rights will be satisfied based on the flow of water in that system. And then you can click even details of those water rights. You can download that data so that you can take it into your own spreadsheets, do whatever analysis that you want to do, and determine whatever project you're working on. Another element is you can click on any of those fields and see exactly which water rights and what priority dates satisfy that. Now, this is going to be very critical as we look at the system on the Colorado River, if compact compliance or curtailment is necessary, so that we can see and show what water rights would be within priority on that system. Just a couple other tools that we're bringing into this network as well are water distribution models. So we build these in-house, and this is just a screenshot of one of the systems that, one of the models that we have on one of our systems. And you can see at the top there's a slide bar. So we can slide that, you slide that across, and you can see what canal, what water right received what water, how much water at what time. Once we build these out, you'll be able to see all of those deliveries, understand where the water went, and this is how our commissioners and our distribution engineers and those of us that manage the water make sure that water gets from point A to B. Another element of these models is teacup diagrams, where we can look at reservoirs and we actually color the water in those reservoirs. So we know whose water right is being diverted, being used, how it's being used. And as you slide that teacup slider, you actually see those accounts change in that reservoir as to what water rights and who's storing the water. This is a groundwater tool. There's many valleys that do rely on groundwater. With this groundwater tool, we can actually identify by a pivot which water rights are being used and what priority dates that they are. And if they're in priority and on, or off because they're out of priority. So it's another tool that we have. And we're trying to bring more transparency to the public so that everyone can see this information. So I think I'm close to my time here, but let me just end here. This is a photo of many of our staff. And I will give a shout out here to our legislature and the representatives that are here and maybe online. We know that the systems are becoming more and more complex, and we do measurement, we do distribution, but we're finding to reduce harm, we need to be more precise as it becomes a more scarce resource. So it takes time to develop those tools, additional staff time, funding, and purchasing of equipment. This last year, actually, former Representative Hawks sponsored a bill that allowed us to hire 2 additional staff. One of those staff is a deputy state engineer, and he's focused on Great Salt Lake issues. We've never been able to do that. We've always just had to absorb that within our existing resources. But now he attends the meetings, and we're paying attention to that. This year, the legislature stepped up in another big way. You know, we've always said, if we had the money, we could do this or we could do that. This year, they did invest $5 million one time into helping us build this network and do more measurement and reporting. They also authorized $1.5 million of ongoing from our restricted fund so that we can focus on some more additional staffing, equipment, and ongoing operation and maintenance of these measuring devices that we install. So, you know, we can no longer say if we only had the funding. Well, we have the funding, so now we're going to really be running. But we appreciate it. They listened, and we'll get the work done. So I think with that, I'm going to end, and I'm going to turn it over to 2 friends that I have here, and I'll let you introduce them.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I think this thing takes a minute to get warmed up. Thank you so much, Teresa. We really appreciate it, and I know that it was fascinating for all of us to hear that and hear about your role as state engineer. So thank you so much. The questions that people sent over via Slido we'll save till the end if time permits. So we'll now turn the time over to Laura.
So I'm Laura Briefer. I'm the director of Salt Lake City Department of Public Utilities. And I want to talk about a city's perspective, a municipal perspective to moving water to Great Salt Lake. And if you've been listening to some or all of these sessions, you've probably caught on that there are a lot of stakeholders in the Great Salt Lake system. And I was fortunate enough over the last several years to be working as a participant and a stakeholder myself on a lot of different Great Salt Lake issues. For instance, I worked on a committee under the House Concurrent Resolution 10 that I think was adopted in 2019 or 2020, where we looked at ways in which we improve flows to Great Salt Lake. And we had a very diverse group of stakeholders involved, from cities to towns to agriculture to industry, just a lot of deep perspectives. And one of my passions is bringing people together and collaboration. And I think, more deeply understanding the perspectives of different stakeholders in this system is where we're going to make the best strides in saving Great Salt Lake. So first of all, what is Salt Lake City's stake in Great Salt Lake? I think it's really important for every stakeholder to have a real clear understanding of where it is that we are connected to this system. And so for Salt Lake City, public health, the environment, our economy, all of that is very interdependent with the health of Great Salt Lake. You can see on this slide the area colored in light blue with the green outline. That is Salt Lake City and Salt Lake City's water service area. We serve water both to all of the residents of Salt Lake City and to communities such as Mill Creek, Holiday, Cottonwood Heights, Midvale, Murray, and South Salt Lake. So we have a large distribution system, and we are all dependent on water from this watershed. I know that Mayor Mendenhall was here at the very beginning of this session talking about what's at stake, so I won't go into great detail because I think you've heard a lot about what's at stake with Great Salt Lake already. But with respect to Salt Lake City, the other thing that we have going for us is most of the water used in this water service area emanates from within the Great Salt Lake watershed. Probably about 60 to 70, 75% in any given year of the water that comes through our Salt Lake City water system comes through our local Wasatch Mountain streams and through groundwater that's all part of this Great Salt Lake Basin. Also, Salt Lake City manages both sanitary sewer or wastewater and stormwater in this system. So I always step back and visualize, that we have this system where we have the water that comes from the Wasatch Mountains and comes down through these canyons into our treatment plants. Our water treatment plants goes into the distribution system, out of faucets, out of sprinklers. The stuff that's used indoors goes into our sanitary sewer system. It gets treated, and then it gets discharged to Great Salt Lake. So it's we're part of this watershed in so many ways, so interconnected. With respect to stormwater, we have the water that runs off during spring runoff and during big storms through our streams and then into Great Salt Lake. So not only are we in such close proximity to Great Salt Lake, but we are a very interconnected piece of this water system. And I think it's important for us to make the case of why municipalities need to prioritize Great Salt Lake. I think it's already been stated multiple times that a shrinking Great Salt Lake has existential and cascading impacts to communities within the Great Salt Lake Basin, whether it's air quality, whether it's economic disruption or water disruption. These are some really big potential impacts. I also think it's important for cities to make the case that an involvement by cities, this chart on the right, by the way, is from the recent report that was released called Emergency Measures Needed to I can't even read my writing, but to help Great Salt Lake. And so anyway, this shows, the proportion of water diversions that impact Great Salt Lake. And, much has been said about how most of this is agriculture and 9% is from cities in the basin. 9% is, small compared to agriculture, but it's still a big number. And I think it's that cities really need to step up to the plate to increase equity and fairness and trust between municipal interests and agricultural interests. And I like to think of this as a virtual cycle leading to collective action. And the definition of a virtual cycle is a chain of events in which one desirable occurrence leads to another, which further promotes the first occurrence, and so on, resulting in a continuous process of improvement. We're all part of this collective action in this virtual cycle. I think, in other words, maybe a more simple way to say it, and I need to thank my colleague Nedra Chandler here with the EDR program for simplifying it for me, but she says, in other words, we are better together. And I think that's really important as part of the case for cities and everyone to be involved in the solutions to this problem. I think there are co-benefits to the public when we work to solve this issue, such as environmental quality. In the Great Salt Lake Basin, the Jordan River itself is an impaired water body under the Clean Water Act. And having additional flows, for instance, in the Jordan River, could help with that water quality impairment. Also, increased water resiliencies. Cities are the underpinning of a city's resiliency is its water system. And if we work to prioritize Great Salt Lake, which means that we're working to conserve more and we're working toward water resiliency, we become a more resilient community. And finally, I think the public benefits of prioritizing Great Salt Lake greatly outweigh the potential public costs. So what are municipal strategies? This is the way Salt Lake City is looking at this, but municipal strategies for Great Salt Lake might include the following two things. One, diverting less water, and number two, protecting flows that already are going to Great Salt Lake. And those two need to happen together, not just one or the other. And in diverting less water, that means enhancing our water conservation programs and outputs. It means addressing water supply and demand planning, integrating land use, economic development, and water resource decisions, all with an eye towards less diversion. For protecting the flows, identifying, really increasing our understanding of the water inputs to Great Salt Lake and where we can step in to protect those existing flows, such as wastewater reuse. And then also optimizing flows to Great Salt Lake when we have years of plenty, like this year is going to be. So an example of conservation programs, investing in programs, really meeting our community where they are. So investing in programs that can be embraced by the community and implemented. Some examples that we have for Salt Lake City is a program called Water Check, where we offer free checks of irrigation systems. We had a very successful turf trade program last summer. We're rolling out a water maps program where data can be readily available for people to identify where they might be using more water than they need to, providing lots of resources, and also including commercial, industrial, and institutional users in the conservation programming. Also with integrated decision making, this is really important. In a lot of cities and towns, you have the water department and the planning division and the economic development department, and we all really like each other a lot, but we all work under a lot of different frameworks, very separate frameworks, and sometimes we don't speak the same language and we don't talk to each other in the way that we need to talk to each other to keep our eye on this ball. And so really working hard to align those functions. An example of this is my public utilities department and our Salt Lake City planning division work together to change a zoning ordinance that introduces a cap to industrial water use throughout our city. And we did that that's evidence-based after a lot of review of our water supply and demand plans and saying, we still can have a lot of good industry here, but we don't need to have industry here that's using 2 million gallons of water a day. And also bringing in our elected officials and their buy-in, that's a really important component. I want to point out there's a growing Water Smart workshop that's happening this June. I think applications might have just closed for that, but communities can go in with an interdepartmental group and talk through what does it look like with integrated planning with respect to water. Long-term water supply and demand planning. So traditionally, as a water provider, Supply and demand planning includes traditionally we're looking at for the long term are sources of water, and then we're projecting the population growth and potential land use changes. And we're deciding based on that, what is the best scenario of demand? And when we look at that scenario of demand, that, what does that mean in terms of other types of policies we might put into place? Traditional planning in my area has not included water for the environment, water for Great Salt Lake. And the door is open now for us to change our water supply and demand planning to put, a placeholder to Great Salt Lake. And with that, though, there will be other cascading plans. So with that, we'll look at additional water conservation planning. It might change what our infrastructure looks like and so on. But it's really important that when we're looking at supply and demand planning, that we look at Great Salt Lake as a water customer. In the lingo in my utility, we have 90,000 connections on our water system. We have 365,000 customers, and I would propose that we say we have 90,001 water connections, and with Great Salt Lake being that big one. And really that changes our perspective and definition of what beneficial use of water looks like. The example on this slide of something that we are committed to doing right now is taking the treated wastewater effluent that's already going to Great Salt Lake and making it official and filing a water right change application on that effluent to commit to Great Salt Lake, which would be around 35 million gallons per day. I know that water's already going there, but if you go back to my water supply and demand plan out to the year 2060, wastewater reuse for municipal purposes is in that plan. And so now I'll be likely taking that out of my plan, which means I will need to find another source of water, i.e. more conservation. And so, that's an important component for us to think about. By gifting that water to Great Salt Lake, what we're really saying is we're committing to that much conservation in the future and then some. And that's the end of my presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, for offering a municipality's perspective, especially the largest municipality here in Utah. And now we'll turn the time over to Trevor Nielson, the general manager of the Bear River Canal Company. Thank you so much, Trevor, for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity to be here and to rub shoulders with you fine folks. The Bear River Canal Company is the largest irrigation company in the state of Utah, and we sit on the northeast arm of the Great Salt Lake. We provide water for 68,000 acres of highly productive crop ground in Box Elder County. And I wanted to cover 3 subjects today, if it'll advance. There we go. How do farmers feel about renting water, and how do they feel about the Great Salt Lake? What are some of the plumbing issues that we're still seeing with getting wet water to the lake? And then we're going to talk about the A word today, alfalfa. So I'm going to start out with some of the most memorable things I've heard from farmers. I don't want to rent my damn farmer to I don't want to rent my water to those damn environmentalists. Great Salt Lake water is wasted water. Don't do any interviews with the media. It draws attention to us. On a more serious note, these are some common questions that I get. What are people going to eat? As was discussed, by the year 2050, by the year 2050, we'll have to produce as much food in that time period as we have in the last 6,000 years. A common narrative I hear around the lake is, well, go farm somewhere else. I hate to break it to you, but that's what they're saying everywhere. Mm-hmm. You're not alone in that narrative. And if everyone goes and farms somewhere else, what are you going to eat? We are not alone in the fact that agriculture is being attempted to be pushed out. Ag is here to stay. We need it because you need to eat. The next is, why should I have to forego my water when the state has allowed too much water to be diverted for development? And then it's related closely to the next one. I'll rent my water as soon as and you can pick any local municipality, stops issuing building permits. These are tied together because farmers have the right to use the water and have done for over 100 years responsibly. But yet as a state, we still seem to be making the societal decision to be increasing demand. But yet you're asking agricultural users to cut back while we're still issuing additional demands. And they see that as a problem. And the last is, I'll grow different crops if this state will compensate me for it. But so far, there haven't really been any programs on that side of the coin. I mean, we are in the business of staying in business. We have family farms, and we'd like to keep those family farms running. And so what makes the most business sense are the things that we will do. So their apprehensions can really be placed into 4 different areas. The first is financial constraints. So the Bear River Canal Company, we'll use it as an example. It took about 50 years to get the whole system dug in and established. And then for the last 100 years, we've been improving that system. The state is asking my farmers and my shareholding farmers to completely redo these systems in less than a decade. Really, we're making a change the change would be comparable to going from the first Apple computer to an Apple Watch in a decade. That's some big changes that are being asked. And the biggest constraint is money. And that's a lot of the reason why ag hasn't optimized to this point, is it's extremely expensive to upgrade irrigation systems. So one thing that I am good at in my job, I feel like, is finding grant money. And the best readily available grants only fund up to 50%. So the remaining 50% has to come from the farmers themselves. There's the old saying that farmers are asset rich and cash poor, and that's very, very true. Well, irrigation system upgrade requires cash, and there's only so much capital available. So we really appreciate the steps taken by the state, and we would like to see federal partners up their programs, such as EQIP through the NRCS, to match the state's increased ramp up of federal funding, so that we can bring that 50% the farmers having to bring to the table down. We've been able to do that in the Bear River Canal Company system, and we've been able to leverage our improvements on a scale of 5-fold. And then the last thing is, there's a lot of pressure on farmers just in general. We're not even going to go into labor or other regulations that we're running into. When you throw water on top of that, and that is the biggest pressure, there are people knocking on our doors wanting to cover our farms with houses. When someone comes up to you and says, I'll pay you $10,000 to $30,000 an acre if you'll retire and live in comfort the rest of your life, that's a really attractive thing. And we have to be careful not to discourage those who want to keep feeding you. I would just say the media has been pretty rough on ag the past couple of years. So let's move on to some of the other apprehensions. So how do I make sure I get my water back? Is another question. This is a real concern. There are innumerable examples in the states of California, Oregon, and Washington of instances where farmers' water was taken on a quote-unquote temporary basis and never came back. Now, I feel like Utah has taken a better approach at this, and I feel like it's a safer bet here than maybe in some of these other places, but it's still a valid concern. We've seen that as society has made changes that have made it so that farmers are scared to rent water, because what if it can't come back when I need it? The next is, how do I stay viable if I participate? Now, this is closely related to financial, but farms are juggernauts as far as businesses go. If you plan on making $100,000 a year net income, you have over $1 million move through your accounts each year. You have things like equipment payments. A week ago, I was looking up, I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to farm equipment, and John Deere just released a brand new combine series, and the base model is $1 million. One piece of equipment is $1 million. And all that does is cut wheat and separate the grain from the chaff. And it's $1 million. Well, if you lease your water for a year, you still have to make the loan payment on that combine. You still have to pay your farm mortgage. You still have to, and then if you're a cattleman, you can't just sell all your cattle one year and a year and a half later buy them back. The tax implications are huge. And you wouldn't have the biodiversity that you'd like to see. There's things that make it so we can't just flip the business on and off with the light switch. So keep that in mind. That doesn't mean that things aren't going to work. It's just we have to be understanding of what farmers can and cannot do. So there are some plumbing concerns still. And the state engineer's gone over that, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that. But to put this in perspective, on the Bear, this is kind of what we've been asked to do. A one-lane road, because of the way water rights, particularly on the very end of the Bear, are situated, it's pretty simple on how they're administered. Well, the complexities that come with trying to move water through water banks and all other kinds of means that have been talked about today are going from this to this. Can it be done? Yes. Yes, it can. I mean, Teresa's shown us today that she has the software and the brains behind making this happen. But the point that we'd put in, the plug that we'd put in is right now the limiting factor is measurement on the main streams of the rivers so that we can distribute in priority. Shepherding is distribution by priority. We know how to do it. We've done it for 100 years. We can do it, but we need the tools. And so something, I guess, calling out our state legislators is we need specific appropriations to add additional gauges, USGH grade gauges to the rivers so that we can move the water. Because right now, that's the barrier to getting water to move in the river system that I'm associated with. So it can be kind of I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but farmers are a little discouraged in Utah when every night they listen to the news, and this is kind of the sentiment that is pressed forward. We need to be mindful that they can only do so much, and they are good people. They may call a lot of you damn environmentalists, but in their heart of hearts, they are really good people. So let's talk about the A word. So I don't have a ton of time in my presentation today, so I'm just going to add one additional layer to the discussion and point you to a fact sheet that was produced by Utah State University. The fact sheet's called 10 Reasons Why Alfalfa is Highly Suitable for the West. It's a really good narrative as to why we do raise alfalfa if you are wondering why we use this water-intensive crop. So this is the Bible of water depletions right now in the state of Utah. This is called the Bob Hill study, and this is one of the tables taken out of it. And as you can see, alfalfa is the largest consumer, right around 30 inches. You have barley down there at almost the bottom, and then corn at the bottom at 17 and 19 inches respectively. And so yeah, why are farmers not just switching to these other two crops? Well, it's because the individuals who are expressing this don't have a full understanding of how farmers actually farm their ground in the greater Great Salt Lake Basin. There's a quotation that's associated with Mark Twain that says, "It ain't what you know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." And so he talked about that this is the depletions if you're doing one crop a year. But farmers, it's about the length of the growing season. It's not about the crop specifically. How an alfalfa rotation works is you do 5 to 7 years of alfalfa, and as the stand starts to fail, you roll that fall into a small grain, usually barley or wheat or triticale. What has started to happen is farmers will harvest that early say end of May, middle of June, and then they'll plant a shorter season corn. It's the craziest thing. In agriculture, they've got corn down to such a science that they have it down to the number of days it takes to grow it. So you grow the proper variety in your area. So instead of growing 180 or 150 day corn, you grow a 120 day corn and you get a whole nother crop. So how does that look when we talk about water? Well, you're getting 2 crops in one water cycle. You can see the barley use there shown on the left and above, and the corn use on below and to the right. When you do the math, you get 13.3 inches out of the barley and 15.73 out of the corn, which gets you to 29.1 inches of depletion. Very, very similar to alfalfa. So the point I'm trying to make is alfalfa is an easy target because the math is easy, but farmers plant crops and grow things based on the length of the growing season. So we need to stop beating up alfalfa and we need to focus on the things we can change. In agriculture, really the key is good irrigation practices. In both of these cropping regimes, if you have the right amount of water at the right time, you get the right crops, the right tonnages, and you can conserve water. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Bear River Canal Company, we're saving thousands upon thousands of acre feet because of the Ag Optimization Program. And we're doing that because we are applying sound science. And so this is a picture of the Bear River Canal Company, the East Canal. And Joel and I did not coordinate today, but this was going to be my ending quote. We can do hard things and we'll be better for it. This canal is massive, and it was dug with a shovel, a pick, and a horse-drawn scraper. If they can build 126 miles of canal and make one of the most impressive irrigation systems I've ever seen with their bare hands, we can do hard things. We can take the example of farmers and apply that to other areas of the economy, to this problem, to solving the issues with the Great Salt Lake. We can do hard things, and we will be better for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trevor. I think you answered about 12 questions with your last segment. We so appreciate the 3 of you taking your time to share your knowledge and expertise with us. And as I'm sure you can imagine, we've gotten a slew of questions, so we'll get through as many as we can. Teresa, we'll start with you. The question that was asked the most is sort of a Water Law 101 question. So the question that many people have is, when a water right is sold, does the new owner go to the bottom of the list? Do they have the newest right, or do they stay, does the owner acquire the right in time from the previous owner?
So that's a simple question. When you purchase a water right, you get that water right, all the elements of the right, including priority and the use. So
perfect. Thank you so much. I think that helps. So I have Laura, question for you. You talked about all Salt Lake City is trying to do and doing to conserve water. So Salt Lake and other municipalities are doing a lot to conserve, but one question we have received a lot is we still have planning commissions and town councils approving development. So with trying to conserve water and population growth, how can we address that?
Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit in my presentation about the need for that integrated planning and economic development and water planning. And I think that's really important in order to come up with policies and strategies to grow smart. We've seen in Salt Lake City proposed development that would be very, very large water users. In the situation of a shrinking Great Salt Lake, is a municipality or a town should be asking themselves, is that the appropriate use? Do we really get the economic benefit from that kind of growth? And so I really think that it's important for planning departments and elected officials and water planners to get together and really have an actual strategy, a meaningful strategy. towards that end.
Okay, thank you so much. Trevor, a question for you, two-pronged question. I'm just going to sort of combine two questions that have been asked by a few people. First of all, what percentage of the Bear River Canal irrigated acreage is used for growing crops consumed directly by humans? And can you also give us a percentage of crops grown in the Bear River Canal area that are shipped overseas? Let's start with the first. How many crops or how much irrigable acreage is used to grow food that's eaten by humans?
So, really, there are three crops that go direct to direct human consumption. We produce quite a bit of onions. There's mint, and then wheat. Our other big crops are alfalfa, corn, and as far as what's exported, I don't know, to be honest. Those are willing buyer, willing seller transitions. There's been a lot of discussion in this conference about this much hay or this much alfalfa is used in these settings. My master's thesis was on alfalfa and its relation in price as water becomes more available and more scarce. And really a lot of the assertions that are being made about alfalfa, I know personally don't have the data to back them up. I know those data sets don't exist because I've looked for them. And we need to be really careful about that, because one thing about hay is none of it's reported if it's consumed on farm. So we have a lot of cow-calf operations in the Great Salt Lake Basin. And that hay never gets counted because it's consumed by a cow, and that's the final product that actually gets reported on. So kind of keep some of that in mind as you view the hay question. The numbers are underreported.
Okay, thank you. Teresa, moving to you. We have a few people who have been paying attention to what legislators have been doing up on the Hill, and they're wondering if you would be willing to describe the role that your office has in managing agricultural optimization change applications under Senate Bill 277.
So Senate Bill 277 is what I think is probably the most important bill that passed this year, I would say. It does bring, for us to shepherd water in a system or move it from point A to B, we need to document how that fits within the prior appropriation system. The Senate Bill 277 includes that they may need to file a change application, which would then allow us to actually quantify that amount of saved water, whether it's diversion savings or depletion savings, and then determine if that can be moved or quantify that right. So we will play a very big role in those pre-consultation meetings with the folks that are looking to participate in the program, and then also for the applications that are going to be filed, and quantifying that depletion savings or diversion savings. So, and then there will be, once we quantify that, we do anticipate that there could be a second change application that gets filed later once there's a buyer for that saved portion, and where are they going to move it and use it. And we need to make sure that there's no harm done to other existing users. So there's going to be a big role that we will play.
Okay, thank you. That's exciting. Some exciting developments. Laura, we sort of have a practical and a question that perhaps you've thought about. Perhaps Salt Lake City has already has something like this in the works. But somebody asks, Salt Lake City has a program that allows customers to donate money on its water bill for conservation. Could we have such a program to have an individual contribute to help farmers out? And then we have quite a few thumbs up that I, for one, would love to contribute.
Yes, Salt Lake City. Well, Salt Lake City has two contribution areas on its bill. One is for watershed protection, and then the other is for a program called Water Assist for water affordability reasons. But yeah, I think I don't know if I would put that on a municipal bill, but I think a GoFundMe for farmers. Is that where?
I told you I was good at finding grant money. I'll spend any money you send my way.
I think what the question indicates is that people here and people throughout Utah are really hoping to work together. And I think that's what you guys have shown us today, that the state, cities, companies, different sectors are really willing to work together to help solve this problem. And that's what it's going to take, is working together. We have 1 minute left. So because we have about 50 questions, I'm going to just ask each of you, if you could distill your thoughts down to one simple takeaway for attendees, what would that 30-second takeaway be? Teresa, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Laura. Actually, let's go backward. You began. Trevor, let's begin with you.
I really liked the comment earlier today by Emily Lewis that it's not a silver bullet, it's silver buckshot. Ag is a huge part of the solution, but we feel like a multi-pronged approach is what's going to need to be taken, and we appreciate what the public has done for us in agriculture, and we won't disappoint.
I think your last question kind of touched on one of my takeaways, and that we're sitting here as a company, a municipal utility, and a state department chatting with you. But I think what it's really going to take to save Great Salt Lake is every single person participating and being part of the collaboration. And I loved the thought of contributing to the places where we need the most help. To me, that showed that there are a lot of people in the public who are prioritizing that.
And maybe what I would say, coming from an engineering aspect, that I do believe that we can continue to use the available science to engineer some of these systems to make this work. And we also can't just have it fall on the backs of one sector, that we all have to work together and share. And even, I've said it multiple times, it's just, the Great Salt Lake isn't just Utah. There are other states also that we need to find ways to be able to work together and make this happen. So.
Thank you so much. Teresa, Laura, and Trevor, we really enjoyed this last hour. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We have a treat now. We have Lynn Freitas, and she's the executive director of the Friends of Great Salt Lake. And we are excited to have her speak with us today. She will be speaking for 15 minutes, and then we'll have a break at 2:30. So she'll be on a panel at the end. So if you have questions for Lynn, you will have, there will be an opportunity to ask these questions, but it will be at the end instead of now. So I'll turn it over to Lynn, who is going to present on a call to action. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you very much. Yes, okay. It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much. I'm going to start out with a little song. My great Salt Lake, I love to sing sweet songs of thee. Phalaropes and brine flies, brine shrimp, microbialites, join in harmony. My great Salt Lake, I'll sing her praise forevermore. I want to live and die in Salt Lake City, on the great Salt Lake shore. There. Thank you. I'm the executive director of Friends of Great Salt Lake. Friends was founded, it'll be 30 years ago this coming October, and I have been a part of the organization for about 28 years. We were founded by the inspiration of the work of the Mono Lake Committee and its success in working to advocate on behalf of that public trust resource. And we use, knowing that our mission to preserve and protect the Great Salt Lake ecosystem and build public awareness and appreciation through education, research, advocacy, and the arts. So we use these different programs to help everyone understand how we are all a part of the whole and how we can be a part of the solution. And sometimes in funny ways, part of the solution is working to advocate for the system and exercise legal channels like public commenting and administrative challenges and things like that. But it's all a part of the whole. And education and awareness building are really key. And knowing that Great Salt Lake, surrounded by 5 counties, northern Utah, but with the projected population growth doubling in 2060 to be about 60 million people, in an arid state, in a disposition where we tend to use still a lot of water per person, there is a lot of work to do. And so what we're talking about here as far as building awareness and participation and being a part of the solution is all a part of the whole as we look forward to the future. And certainly, there have been a lot of people saying, well, what can we do? And, is there hope? And things like that. And, our answer is yes. I'm an optimist. I'm not naive. But I consider myself to be a part of the solution by working to find those solutions, building partnerships, developing collaborations, making sure that Great Salt Lake is a part of the ongoing conversation. And so certainly, with the system in decline, it has brought a lot of attention, as it should. And fortunately, in the 25 years that I've been a part of Friends of Great Salt Lake, I'd say the past 3, thank you, former Representative Tim Hawks, for your sponsorship of HCR 10. That helped put Great Salt Lake on the map as far as a recognition that this system is in a state of decline, and what are we going to do about it? And my fast friend, Speaker Brad Wilson, so much legislation has been, and I'll use a pun, flooding awareness and opportunities and building tools for all of us so that we can actually get traction toward the right solution. So I have actually 3 ideas for my call to action. And the first one is, there's a huge policy gap, and we need to set a target elevation range for the lake. So we've been fixing on the low lake elevation, but it's time, especially with the inspiration that has come from the Great Salt Lake Strike Team, and a tool that I always rely on from the 2013 Great Salt Lake Comprehensive Management Plan, the Great Salt Lake Elevation Matrix. We have ways that we can think about coming up with where do we want to go with all of this effort. Certainly, distribution, shepherding, commitment, yes, but how is that going to translate into making a difference for the system? And so the strike team did a very good job in setting the stage, helping us understand how there are ways in which we can identify, practicing better water conservation with the tools that have been made available, but also, where we can go with that. And this is the Great Salt Lake Elevation Matrix. I call it the Great Salt Lake Rosetta Stone. And along the x-axis on the top, you can see that basically it's very complex. And when you have time, and you want to have fun, you should download this. We have a PDF on our website, and you can actually look at the finer details. But this matrix, basically along the x-axis, you look at an array of ecosystem services like islands, habitats, mineral extraction, navigation, access, salinity concentrations, things like that. And then on the y-axis, you're looking at elevation. Elevation from an elevation of 4188 to 4213. And green is good. Green means that it's beneficial for the resource. So if you look at this fairly carefully, when you have it close and personal, you'll see that there's a sweet spot, if you will, right in the middle where there's a lot of green. And this elevation range is 4198 to 4205. Now, I can't say that this is where we should go. And in this room, it's a part of a process where we need to come up and we need to decide, what are we going to shoot for? So at least we have a target elevation to address ecosystem services, ecological viability. And, with, again, the opportunity with the appointment of a Great Salt Lake Commissioner, looking beyond the meander line, looking into the Great Salt Lake Basin watershed, perhaps in the strategic plan that the Great Salt Lake Commissioner will be drafting and preparing to present to the legislature in November. This target range elevation conversation should be included, so we can cut to the chase and get moving. So, it's just like when you want to ride a two-wheeler, and you really want to go forward on that thing, but you have to put on training wheels to help you go forward and build your confidence and get mileage that you can say, yeah, I'm going forward. The elevation matrix and the process around that to come up with an elevation range can be that same kind of inspiration and that same kind of confidence building, same kind of demonstration of a belief system. Okay, so my second idea is that we need to move beyond the meander line, especially since we have the appointment of the Great Salt Lake Commissioner. So this is Bob Adler's law review, 1999. I'm not religious, but I consider it my Bible, and I have it with me often. And you can see that I've turned pages down and put my name on the front of it, so when I share it with someone, I'm sure to get it back. But Bob talked about, we have a terminal lake in a 21,000 square mile hydrologic basin. Everything that comes down from that basin, if it gets there, goes to the lake. But everything that doesn't come down doesn't get there. So a terminal lake, no outflows, it's reliant upon precipitation, but also the inflows that hopefully will come from the three riverine systems that feed it. So Bob was saying we have to go beyond, just the lake. We have to go into the watershed. And I have the utmost respect for the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands and its jurisdictional responsibility to manage this public trust resource in perpetuity for the people of Utah. But I also think that the limitations of only being able to see as far as the meander line, whatever that magic elevation is it's an impediment. And so I feel I'm looking forward to the opportunity of working with the Great Salt Lake Commissioner and going outside the box, going beyond the lake and exercising those relationships and opportunities that can benefit the system. Okay, my third idea is we need to rethink the use of water in the lake. I thought it was really interesting to hear the quote of Brigham Young defining beneficial use as responsible use. And the more I think about Great Salt Lake, public trust resource, impacts that are happening to this declining system, the beneficial uses that are going on in the lake have to be responsible uses on behalf of the future of this Great Salt Lake ecosystem. So I think, when water in the lake was considered wasted, there was a trend to put as much of it as possible to beneficial use. And with all due respects to my friends in the mineral extractive industries, Joe, where are you? 600,000 acre-feet of water rights are provided for mineral extraction. And I'm just wondering if there isn't an opportunity to revisit this. Certainly with HB 513, thank you, Representative Snyder, future lease contracts have to be considered in a different way than perhaps they were way back when. But I think we need to revisit, when the lake is in a state of collapse, is it also the right thing for an industry to be able to, see, yes, water isn't getting into its evaporative ponds to continue with its operation, but isn't there an opportunity for a logical and responsible pause button so that we don't have to worry about bringing water into the system to perhaps address salinity concentrations that are impacting ecological viability, and having that water go into an intake canal to be evaporated to create and feed the market demand of mineral extraction. So, just a thought, but maybe this is something that we can revisit and see where it can go. In the words of Warren Peterson, who I had the extraordinary pleasure of working with on the recommended state water strategy for Governor Herbert, and who, at the onset of that process, which was a 3-year process in 2014 to 2017, I made a pinky promise with Warren, and I said, Warren, we have to remember that Great Salt Lake needs to be a part of the water future and this recommended state water strategy. And just between you and me, I told Warren, if you weren't married and I wasn't married, I'd marry you. Because I was so pleased. You can tell Warren I told that joke. But I was so pleased that, Great Salt Lake did prevail in the state water strategy. And Warren, as he says, the lake is as essential to who we are and what we are as anything. When Great Salt Lake is in peril, the state is in peril. So we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for that and for your thoughts, and we really appreciate it. We will now have our last break, not only of the day, but of the conference. So we will take a break, and we have until 2:55. At 2:55, we will reconvene, and we'll be hearing from some other speakers. So thank you so much.